Let's continue on with MIDI in Max MSP. We created a basic sine wave synthesizer with K-slider and ADSR, but what if I want to hook this up to an actual MIDI controller and play it using a more traditional piano keyboard where I can actually use my fingers and not a mouse? Let's take a look at how to do that in a couple of different ways. The first way to do it is with an object called MIDI in. MIDI in outputs raw MIDI data. So if I take a look at what's coming in when I hit a MIDI key, it's going to be a little overwhelming. Or not. It literally cannot deal with everything, so it's going to only give me a little bit at a time. If, however, I hook that up to a print object, you'll see that it's throwing out all of these values all at once. Holy cow, what do I do with that? Well, the answer is that I use another object called MIDI parse, which interprets the raw MIDI data. As always, I can bring up the help file, and it will tell me exactly what's coming out of MIDI parse. Leftmost is note on and off pairs, which you have to unpack using the unpack message. Then there's poly pressure, which I'm not really worried about for now. Control change, that's a good one. Program change, not worried about that. Aftertouch, that could be fun. Pitch bend, MIDI channel, and then MIDI events that are properly formatted for the VST object, which we're going to get to eventually. For now, I'm only going to focus on a couple of things. We're going to take a look at what's coming out of the note on and off list, and we're going to take a look at the control change messages. Oh, that's interesting. So right now, I've hit this key on my keyboard. I'm using a Stencil Morph, so it's sending MPE data, which includes all sorts of things like bend, polyphonic aftertouch for the Z-axis, Y-axis, etc. I'm hitting key 72, which is the C above middle C. You can see coming out of the leftmost inlet, I have the velocity and the key number. So key 72, velocity of 43. And when I take it off, the velocity goes to 0. Now over here on the 74, that is the Y-axis. So that is coming through. That's a control change number. Interesting. That means that I can constantly output different control values. Very good to know. What I'm going to do is compare that to some other objects. There is note in, and note in does basically the same thing. It gives me the pitch and it gives me the velocity, but they're two separate and not particularly formatted messages, meaning that they're not a perfect list. So if I take a look at it, I get 7231 and then 0. So if I wanted to send that as a MIDI data, I would have to repack the list in order to send it to MIDI out or to note out. Finally, I have control in. Oop. Accidentally hit a comment there. So CTL in, and this gives me control data coming from my MIDI device. If I hook it up, I can see that the first thing is the controller value coming out, and the second is the controller number. So since I'm only using the Y-axis, it should be 74 for the controller number, no matter what key I hit, and then the value will range from 0 to 127. Cool. So, knowing that, I can take this one step further with control in particular. Control in takes an argument, which is the control number to look for. So let's tell it control in 74. So now it's just looking for everything on number 74. And that can be really cool if, for example, I want to look for, say, the sustain pedal, which is always going to be 64. So here I'm moving control 74, but I'm holding down my sustain pedal, so it's staying at 127 until I take that off. Good stuff. Now, let's take a look at adapting this. I can use whichever method I want, but I'm going to go with MIDI parse. First, I need to take an unpack object, which is going to be two integers, connect that to the note on and note off pair. This will give me the same thing that's coming out of make note, except I can now sustain. I can get rid of all of that and connect like that. Now, coming out of unpack on the left is going to be the pitch, and on the right is going to be the velocity, but keep in mind with MIDI parse, it will sustain the velocity until I release the key. That means that I can hold down the key and it will keep going until I release. Good stuff.